It's a really, really interesting subject. And again, I love Facebook. I've got, like yourself, enjoy little debates. And I put a thing on there a few weeks ago precisely about this question: would Jesus have ever encouraged people to form a church? Some said to me, most people said no. This is Christians and non-Christians. Some said, hang on, you be careful, because he certainly seemed to call people out and give them something which perhaps they didn't have before. Well, I think they did have before. He just helped them find it in themselves.
Right.
But there's no way at all that Jesus wanted to form a church. No, he was a Jew, and he wanted people to be plugged back into their tradition. I think what really peed him off was the amount of people who weren't allowed to be part of that culture, the religious culture, because of various purity codes that have become over-exaggerated or whatever else. He seemed to undercut the authorities and give people back themselves. Now, that's not to say that there shouldn't be a church. Absolutely not. But it's fascinating. One of the new book I'm working on, which I haven't said much about at the moment to anybody really, is it's all about Jesus, but it's all about Jesus from a very different perspective. I'm interviewing pagans about Jesus because a lot of can I just say a little bit about it?
Of course, yeah,
because it does tie in with what you've been saying.
Does it have a title yet? Do you want to tell us a little more about
the title? I began by thinking that the title might be something like Jesus Through Pagan Eyes, and that might end up the subtitle, or it might be the title. The actual title that I have up my sleeve, I'd rather keep up my sleeve for a bit.
Okay, fine, sure.
Partly because it is a little provocative, but also it's quite exciting, and it says exactly what I want to say, if I'm allowed to use it. But basically, my idea was, because I've spent the last 3 years kind of on the edge of the church, still seeing myself as a priest, but having the privilege of making friends and building relationships with people who see themselves as pagan. So people who, would very much see their gods and goddesses, their experience of the divine as fully alive with them wherever they are, but experienced beautifully out in creation, in nature, using various rituals and customs, symbols to connect to their experience of the divine in nature. And I've been interviewing, or been making friends with a lot of men and women from these traditions, a lot of whom were once Christians. And I started to think to myself, what was it that, like myself, that has sort of squeezed them out of orthodox religion, of establishment religion. And when I discuss this with my friends, none of them ever have a problem with Jesus. It's always the institution. It never have a problem with Jesus, unless it's the Jesus that they hear preached by the evangelistic rallies who wants them to be a follower of him, otherwise they're going to hell. Well, I'm not surprised they have a problem with that Jesus. But Jesus as a human being, first century Jewish, mystical human being, they don't have a problem with. So I thought, and I've met a few who get quite upset in the sense that it's almost as if they've been robbed a relationship with a friend that they now have no connection with because they're outside his world. Not that they want to worship him as a God figure,
right,
but as a spiritual teacher. So I thought to myself, an interesting idea for a book would be, and it would be almost like an offering to my friends, to look through their eyes at Jesus again without the baggage of the church. Now, 3 things have happened when I've been researching for this book. The first is that I've discovered that there's 3 Jesuses anyway, or 3 Christs. In actual fact, there's Jesus Christ, and there's Christ. So there's 3 personalities. There's the historical Jesus, which that's a subject in itself, but basically there's been a 200-year.
Sorry, do you mean Mark Jesus the man?
Yeah, Jesus the man, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Basically, at the end of a 200-year-old quest in biblical scholarship, we're now at the place in time where we're beginning to feel that we can get a grasp on who Jesus was as an actual person. there's only about 15% of the stuff in the New Testament that's articulated by Jesus actually were his words. So the scholars are telling us.
Yeah.
And he's a very different personality to what we imagine. So we've got this historical Jesus. We've also got what we call the Christ, which is, in many people's minds, very similar to what Buddhists would call the Buddha nature. It's that universal presence, the anointed part of matter. So as a very well-known Christian Catholic priest has recently said, wherever you get spirit and matter together, you get Christ, because it's the cosmic Christ, the Christ in all things, which a lot of people from different faiths would have different terminology for, but it's the same thing. So you've got Jesus, the historical person, you've got Christ, the cosmic force, and then you've got Jesus Christ, which is what the church has done with the historical Jesus. And the Jesus Christ, the Orthodox Christ, if you like, is where we will find problems with interfaith dialogue and talking about how Jesus relates to pagans or whatever, because usually that Christ, the Jesus Christ of the church, is a very exclusive sort of person. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. Those sort of terms. Jesus himself probably never said that, but the Christ of the church says that, because you're then attaching a mythic kind of symbolic Christness to the historical Jesus. And I think the problem is that Jesus Christ is a literalized myth. You know, it's myth and it's fact together, but we've made it all into a literal fact. So what I've been discovering is that pagans have no problem with Jesus the man, and most have no problem with Christ the cosmic force. The problem comes with working out where they stand with regard to the Jesus Christ. So that's the first part of the book, really, is looking at that. And then I've interviewed a lot of leading names in the world pagan movement, all about their experiences or their views of Jesus, who he was as a person, or Christ, what that energy means. So there's a whole section of fascinating essays by different pagan elders.
Okay.
And then there's another section which is me interviewing them. But it's fascinating, it really is.
Fantastic.
And it's giving me a new insight as well into, because what I've discovered actually is the Jesus that the historical quest material has ended up with is very similar to the Jesus that pagans have been telling me they imagine him to be like. You know? For example, one famous biblical scholar refers to Jesus as a spirit person, which is very close to the term shaman. You know, a person who is totally alive and aware to that, whatever it is, that spirit, the world of the spirit, and expresses it through compassion, but also has visions in the wilderness, is somehow mysteriously able to bring people close to their own inner God, spirit as well. So, you know.
Yeah. Fascinating. Tell me something. What do you say to people who say that actually none of the Bible is fact, that it's all symbolic and or metaphorical and or allegorical? Do you have a view on that?
I have a view on it. I don't have a problem with people who feel that, and I don't have a problem with people who think it's all literal. I don't go with either of those approaches. I think it's clear to me that the Bible is a mixture of allegory, mythology, metaphor, and some history as well. Again, I do trust the current scholarship. A lot of people said to me when I was writing this book about Jesus, oh, you must tell stories about how he came to Britain, or how he went over to Tibet and learned from the Buddhists in his missing years. It's a lovely romantic idea, and maybe he did, but we don't know that.
Is that sort of information available?
No, of course not, because we don't even have information to say where he was born. I mean, most people would say, oh, he was born in Bethlehem, but the modern scholars are not sure whether it was Bethlehem. There's actually a Galilean Bethlehem as well, which is not too far from Nazareth, so it may have been there, or it may have been that he was born in Nazareth. We don't actually know, we don't have the resources to tell us, but what we do know historically is that he existed. Very few people would actually claim that Jesus as a historical person didn't exist. there aren't any really serious biblical scholars, critical scholars or historians who would say that. And I kind of trust that, because there are various techniques that they use to get to the place that they do in their scholarship.